welcome to the 101 on Sports here on Fox 2. We are at the Jack Buck Grill at the Missouri Athletic Club. It's great to have you with us, and the Blues season for 2022-2023, unfortunately, is over. But fortunately for us, we get an opportunity to talk over the Blues season and next year with Jamie Rivers. You hear him every day on the Fast Lane on 101 ESPN. You saw him throughout the season on Bally Sports. Jamie Rivers, there's no better hockey expert in St. Louis that I'd rather talk to about this season than you.
Well, I appreciate that. Hopefully I can shed some light on things here.
Well, first of all, relative to what you expected back in October, how'd you feel about this season?
Well, disappointed. I really felt that this was a playoff team. I think you and I even had a couple of discussions regarding that about a month or so into the season, still believing that this was a playoff type team. And when you look at it on paper, it should have been. Things should have been more successful for the St. Louis Blues. The D-core was supposed to be an area of strength. Jordan Binnington between the pipes, he's back. He was healthy. We know how he finished last season against the Avalanche. He was fantastic until the injury. So you had a good foundation in place. You had Ryan O'Reilly on a contract year, Vladimir Tarasenko on a contract year, Ivan Barbashev on a contract year, so motivated players per se. And then you had a couple of young studs in Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou who are looking to continue taking those next steps. So overall, at the start of the season, I felt very optimistic about this team.
I did too, especially with the way they ended last year. But there were things that happened. You lost David Perron. You lost Jim Montgomery, who, by the way, is the head coach of now the greatest regular season team in history. You signed the contracts to the two youngsters, Thomas and Kyrou, with, as you mentioned, Tarasenko and O'Reilly coming up on free agency. What do you think the biggest issue was?
Well, team defense overall. And everybody likes to highlight the fact that, the defensive core didn't do a good job of clearing the front of the net and the middle of the ice was available. I would agree with that. But you also have to look at the way it starts. Every play starts in a different zone. And Craig Berube is big on the forecheck. And the Blues were not a very good forechecking team to start the season. Even up until recently, they hadn't been a very good forechecking team. Well, if you allow the opposition to exit the zone with speed, that creates gaps in the neutral zone. That doesn't allow the defenseman to be able to gap up and step up and close out plays, as Craig Berube talks about. You have to back up. You're almost on your heels. And when you do that, you're giving up lines. So in hockey terms, you don't like to give up the red line. You don't like to give up the blue line because that means the other team is taking ice against you. And I think that's where the biggest problem lied, is you gave up the zone too easy, and then once teams were in the zone, you didn't defend strong enough from the middle of the ice out.
So from a layman's perspective, is that an issue of coaching? Is it an issue of effort? Is it a systemic issue? What causes a team that was really good when they won the Stanley Cup, the best forechecking team that we've ever seen in St. Louis, what causes a team to not be as good?
Compete level. In my opinion, it's the players competing to a level that is uncomfortable. And that's what you have to be. I mean, unless you're an absolute skill team, like you have the Toronto Maple Leafs, or the number of guys that are 30, 40 goal scorers, the McDavids, the Dreisaitl's, we can bring up a number of superstars in the league. You don't have one on this team. You've got some budding young stars and you have some solid players, but you don't have that superstar. So therefore, you have to have a team that competes every single night. Every shift matters. And I just feel like the effort was inconsistent from the group overall. It's not saying that every player hasn't worked hard. It's just that they, for whatever reason, it wasn't ever at the same time or consistent enough where players were pulling together at the same time. I do feel, though, since the trade deadline, like this team has gotten better regarding that.
I agree. How much of an impact did losing Jim Montgomery have?
Well, a lot bigger impact than people probably realize. I think people now probably look back and go, okay, yeah, that guy was pretty good. But you can't forget that Jim Montgomery was a very successful head coach in Dallas. I mean, he was one overtime goal away from eliminating our Stanley Cup champion Blues in 2019. Had some personal issues. Things kind of went sideways for Jim, who's an incredible individual, by the way, just the greatest guy ever. So it's nice to see him get his life back on track.
By the way, as a teacher yourself, from what I understand, one of the best teachers ever of the sport and the nuances of the sport.
Well, he understands the mentality of a lot of these younger players now. And it's funny, he creates little group chats with certain players. He had a group chat here in St. Louis with the Russian guys, then the young guys, then the veteran guys over here, the defense corps. And he would just stay in touch with guys all the time. He knows when to push the buttons. He knows how to joke with the players, how to get his message across. He's super intelligent when it comes to X's and O's. And I do think that losing Jim Montgomery affected the Blues because he was part of the penalty kill Started with the power play, then he moved to the penalty kill. The penalty kill was unbelievable last year.
The best in the league.
And the Boston Bruins, number 1 in the NHL this year in the penalty kill. So, yeah, if the question is, did you miss Jim Montgomery? Yeah, of course you did. But you still have a very good coaching staff in place. And Craig McTavish is a fountain of knowledge when it comes to experience in the game of hockey. So I don't think it was a massive drop-off from the point of you lost Jim Montgomery, there goes the season. But he was a piece of the puzzle that really fit well here.
I do radio every morning. You do radio every afternoon. We have a text line that comes into our station, and I can't tell you how much criticism Jordan Binnington got from fans. Was it deserved?
I don't think it is deserved. And I understand the numbers don't lie. And that's the one thing that the stats people or the numbers nerds will call them. They just flock to the stats. And the stats aren't great. That's fine. But I would argue if you put 10 hockey minds in a room, some of the best, and you ask them to watch the games and describe Jordan Binnington, they'd say that's a goalie that's been left on an island all by himself. And a lot of the grade A chances are through the roof. The amount of slot shots and inner slot shots that he's had to face this season for the St. Louis Blues, that goes back to that inconsistent defensive play by the whole group. He was facing so many opportunities from the other team, and I don't know how many times he has to make a highlight reel save, and he never stopped competing. So for me, this franchise right now is in incredible shape moving forward with their goaltending. They've got Jordan Binnington, and then they got the young Joel Hofer, who is everything we've read about, and we've seen it early so far.
I want to circle back to the defense because I look at them, and again, from layman's terms, from a skill set standpoint, I say you could win with that group. Am I wrong? If you put that group together and they played at their best, could you win with that group of defensemen?
I think you can. I think if they play to their potential,
yeah,
and that's what you're saying,
right.
Is Nick Leddy, he came in and played so good last year for the St. Louis Blues at the trade deadline. Doug Armstrong felt like it was okay to walk on David Perron and re-sign Nick Leddy because he was going to be such a big piece of the puzzle. Colton Karraker, Justin Falk, these guys carry big contracts. They're pillars on your D-core. Torrey Krug was your quote-unquote pivot from Alex Pietrangelo, one of the most productive power play defensemen in the NHL during his entire career. So you'd think, okay, well, that's going to keep the power play going as well. And then you had some good pieces on the bottom half, too. You had Perunovich, which was a question mark, but certainly a lot of upside. Scandella, a veteran guy who you re-signed to a 3-year contract extension. Robert Bortuzzo, Nico Mikkola. You had just an unbelievable amount of depth on your blue line. It should have been better. But, again, players also have to play to their potential every year.
Right. One other thing about this particular season. If things would have gone okay physically, it appeared there was a fracture, at least Doug Armstrong kind of referred to one in the room. Could this have been a playoff team even if there would have been fractures in the room?
Yeah, I still think the personnel was there. I really do. I feel like when you've got guys like Ryan O'Reilly, Vladimir Tarasenko, you have that top 6D that you had in place, your D-core, the goaltender. To me, all of the elements were there. And Randy, I've played on teams that had fractures throughout the locker room, had disagreements from time to time, and it never affected the product on the ice. Guys just did their job. They were professional about it. They went out and worked really hard. Maybe they didn't go have a nice cold one after the game with each other, but so what? Who cares? Show up and do your job. So I feel like there's always a way to power through any kind of problems that are in the locker room, albeit unless it's something that's catastrophic, but I didn't see signs of that from this team.
When Doug Armstrong got Ryan O'Reilly on July 1st of 2018, signed Perron, signed Bozak, he said, we're opening a 5-year window. First year they win the Stanley Cup. Second year they probably had the Stanley Cup taken away because of the pandemic. The Bouwmeester thing happens. You lose Pietrangelo, you lose Steen. But if you look at the 5 years that are coming to a close right now, are you satisfied with the 5-year run?
Well, I think you have to be.
You got a cup.
You got a Stanley Cup. This franchise has never seen a Stanley Cup before. Been close a couple times, but you finally got to drink champagne out of the Stanley Cup. I think you're satisfied at that point. And you were competitive. To your point, the pandemic year, St. Louis Blues were the favorite team. They were the first team in the Western Conference, the pandemic, the bubble, all that, kind of mixed and mashed things up a little bit. So that's another good team there. Barring Jordan Binnington getting hurt last year, maybe a couple of other injuries, you're a competitive team again. So I think if you stand back a year or two from now and you're out of the moment, I think you look back and say that this 5 years has been successful.
Jamie Rivers, Randy Karraker, and the 101 on Sports. We're going to spin it forward. What can we expect in 23-24 from your St. Louis Blues? That's coming your way here on Fox 2. Welcome back to the 101 on Sports. Jamie Rivers with us on Fox 2, talking the Blues as their 2022-2023 season has come to an end. And Jamie, let's spin it forward to next season. Let's start with this. Craig Berube on your show on the Fast Lane on 101 ESPN expressed confidence in Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou becoming leaders of a good team. What do you think of those comments?
Well, I think they're great. Why not expect that from your young guys? I think it's the coach setting expectations for his younger players. So if they're listening at all to the radio show, which I'm sure they're big fans, no doubt. They're understanding the message from Craig Berube. And look, we have seen Robert Thomas already in the last couple of seasons evolve into more of a leadership role. He's in front of the cameras more. He represents the team more. Jordan Kyrou isn't quite there yet. Personality is slightly different, of course. Jordan Kyrou is a way more quiet individual, but this is their team. They've got 8 more years with the blue note on their chest. They have the longest tenured contracts as of right now. This is their team. They have to take some ownership of that team, and in doing so, it's taking baby steps forward in the leadership role. You can't just kick the doors open next year and be like, hey, we're leading this team, because you have great leadership already in place. Guys like Braden Shen, Justin Falk, Colton Karraker, Torrey Krug. These are all guys that are great leaders. So you don't want to try and overtake that. But there's nothing wrong with Craig Berube expecting both of those guys, who are going to be a huge part of this franchise, to become better leaders moving forward.
Doug Armstrong for years has talked about making this a speed franchise. The Blues go out and get Vrana off of waivers from Pittsburgh. They go, or Kasperi Kapanen off waivers from Pittsburgh. Vrana in the trade with Detroit. What's your confidence level in those guys, if they're healthy? And that's a big if for both guys. But being able to do it for 6 months.
So in doing some background check on Kasperi Kapanen, all the reports came back really good. His teammates in Toronto really liked him. His teammates in Pittsburgh really liked him. It just didn't work out for whatever reason. It happens in pro sports where sometimes the mix is not right. I look at him play. He's a very competitive player so far since he's been here with the Blues. I look at him stylistically, what he's able to do, and then I see from a standpoint of position-wise, Craig Berube's already moved him over to center position a couple times and done some things. I think he's ready to become even bigger, a bigger part of this team. So I'm very confident in Kasperi Kapanen. When you look at Jacob Vrana, he's got all this high-end skill, all this high-end talent, and he creates a lot of scoring opportunities. I'd like to see him evolve his 200-foot game a little more compete for loose pucks, a little more compete in the corners. But certainly, he's got the capabilities. He's scored 30 goals in this league before. You can see that he gets to the areas to score goals. So for me, these guys are going to be great. They're actually speeding up the process of this retool, as Army called it.
There's an old term, and as a Canadian farm boy, you know it. It's the bell cow. It's the cow that wears the bell, and all the other cows follow along, whether they're going out to the pasture or whether they're coming back. Give me a bell cow for this franchise. We had O'Reilly, we had Tarasenko, we had Alexander Steen, Petro. You had a group of bell cows that won the cup. Who's a bell cow on this team?
For me, it's Braden Shen. Braden Shen is the bell cow, 100%. I mean, I don't know the situation when it comes to wearing the C next year. I'm sure a lot of St. Louis people are holding out hope for Ryan O'Reilly to come back. And if he does, I could see him assuming the role as captain. But if for some reason he doesn't, I absolutely believe that Braden Shen is the guy to put the C on his jersey. And even if he doesn't get that, he's still your leader. Who else on the team drags this team into battle more than Braden Shen? Who else blocks shots, gets in fights, makes hits, takes hits, plays with broken ribs? That, to me, it's not even close. He's the bell cow.
Am I right, by the way, about what a bell cow does?
Absolutely, yeah. You follow the bell cow.
Yeah,
that's why they have the bell on their neck.
Hey,
well done, Rich.
Thank you. One other thing I want to touch on here is Craig Berube, because I think through this transitional season, and I look at a team's compete level. And overall, yes, there were overall questions during the course of the season about the compete level. But, man, after the trade deadline, I really love the way he kept this team from spiraling downward.
Craig Berube is a very optimistic individual. He's hard-nosed, he played us that way, and he's a coach that's very honest, too, with his players, and sometimes to a fault. He expects guys to have thick skin, and you got it. You should. In my opinion, I fall under the same umbrella. I was like, yeah, you should have some thick skin. But Craig Berube's done an incredible job of getting the most out of certain players. Obviously with the three guys you acquired at the trade deadline, Sammy Blais a little bit before that, but look at Sammy Blais, what he's turned into. Look at what he's been able to do to develop some of the younger guys up front. Jake Neighbors is incredibly promising moving forwards. For me, Craig Berube, I would have loved to have played for a coach like Craig Berube. He sets the expectations right out there in front of you. You know exactly what's expected. The systems are not difficult. They're not difficult. They're mostly based on being competitive and working hard, which is something you can control. So for me, the effort level and the systems, and just for him recognizing certain situations in the game, I think Craig Berube is a perfect fit for this group moving forward.
Always good to talk to you. Thank you very much, Jamie.
Always good, Rendell.
That is Jamie Rivers. You hear him every afternoon on the Fast Lane on 101 ESPN. Coming up, we're headed down the stretch of the school year, and the sports in the spring is closing down as well. We're going to talk to our friend Jim Powers about that next on the 101 on Sports here on Fox 2. Welcome back to the 101 on Sports, and it's good to have you with us on Fox 2. You see Jim Powers on the Fox 2 Prep Zone on a regular basis, and it's always good to talk high school sports with you. Good to see you.
I know, great to see you. We haven't done this in quite a long time, so it's awesome to be here with you tonight.
And what a magnificent basketball season for both boys and girls in Missouri.
Without a doubt, and when you go back and look at it, it's almost historic with what we pulled off this year, not only on the St. Louis side, but over on the Illinois side. You've got, the O'Fallon girls that took care of their business. Then over here, Cardinal Ritter winning their third in 4 years on the boys' side. Vashon just does what Vashon does, and that's win state championships. They're 14th, and then their girls back it up with their first state championship. Lutheran St. Charles winning their second, then Incarnate Word, once again, they just do what they do, and that's win basketball games and state championships. So, this year was just an unbelievable year on the hard court, with these high school kids.
Incarnate Word nationally is doing things that are pretty unprecedented, aren't they?
Without a doubt. I mean, when you get to 100 wins consecutive, it's rare air. But then you look at the schedule. And Stratford, that's who Incarnate's chasing right now. Stratford, a few years back, won 123 straight. I don't want to take anything away from that streak. When you get to that, it's incredible. But Incarnate's doing it playing a national schedule. They're playing some of the best teams on the West Coast. They're playing some of the best teams in Kansas, some of the best teams down in Louisville, Kentucky. I mean, they're just not staying here and playing the local teams. They're getting out, and that's what Dan does. And when he's got the groups of kids that he's had, especially this year with Natalie Potts, who's going to the University of Nebraska, you got Coffee. I mean, this group was just so incredible to watch. And I'm telling you, I really believe that they can get the streak, and now it's a national story. It's just not St. Louis, it's a national story.
It is a great story, and that's one of the great stories we had unfold. Another one is at Vianney this year.
Oh, you know what, and I get a chance in talking to a lot of coaches and a lot of players. There's a lot of, dads coaching their sons, or dads coaching their daughters, moms coaching their daughters. But, Luke and Kevin Walsh, the dynamic with those two, it's unbelievable. If you ask Kevin if he shot the ball as well as Luke does, he would say absolutely not in a million years. Luke is just a pure shooter. And watching those two on the court together, and Kevin coaching him, and Luke just doing what Luke does, it's so much fun. And that's what sports is all about. And the best thing is, too, they don't talk about it at home. Mm-hmm. What happens at court, what happens in school, it stays there. Everything else at home is just family time and really getting into that. And I think that's very important.
And it's hard to do, right? Because we've seen a lot of father-son combinations where it's dad and son or daughter, and it can strain the relationship. Maybe the best thing to do is to not talk basketball at all.
Well, without a doubt. I mean, the Button crew extremely well. I mean, you talk about Bobby Button, he's got all of his sons that have played for him, and you can imagine that dynamic. But no, I mean, the best thing is, honestly, keep that at school. Keep that in the gym. Keep it on the field.
This is an interesting area in that over the years we've turned out some nationally known Olympic quality swimmers and divers. And Kylie Sullivan, with state swimming this year, might join that crew.
I'm telling you what, over the last 2 years, I mean, she's going to Mizzou for a reason. And what she has done for the Parkway South program and just here in the state of Missouri has just been unbelievable over the last 2 years. This young lady can swim with the best of them. I think her move to Mizzou is terrific because I think she can get after it with some of the SEC's best.
Remember that name, Kylie Sullivan. Jim, this past week we had the opportunity to see the U.S. women's national soccer team in town, and girls soccer in our area has grown so much over the last few years, and it was great to see the Olympic team.
It was, and the atmosphere, down there was just terrific. I had a chance to go, and seeing that showcase at City Park, and seeing where girls soccer has come over the last 5 to 7 years, and I still go back to last year, the state championship, Class 4, St. Dominic playing Narix Hall. You had 5,000 people at the soccer park. And it wasn't just the fans, families, or the student bodies. It was the casual fan. And it was just such an unbelievable showcase for girls soccer, not only here in St. Louis, but in the state of Missouri.
Another sport that is taking a big leap is boys volleyball. So often, Jim, we see sports get cut, and now boys volleyball becoming a sanctioned sport in Missouri.
Yeah, the vote's going on right now, and St. Louis has been a hotbed for boys volleyball for many years, and now they've got the backing from across the state. What you have to have is 50 schools in 3 of the district regions for MISHA, and they've hit that. So now the vote is on the table with all the principals and superintendents and athletic directors on whether or not it's going to be a sanctioned sport. I think it's a huge, huge step for boys volleyball and the growth and development. We're seeing a lot of colleges adding boys volleyball, men's volleyball programs, and it's just adding to what's going on. And then you look at the teams. I mean, Jeff Cheek, what he's done over at St. Louis U High over the last bunch of years. Vianney, Chaminade, and then it's trickling down the Webster Groves of the world, the Parkway West of the world. It's just terrific to see the sport grow as much as it has, and I really believe that getting that MISHA sanctioning will be huge to keep that growth going.
Good to see you, Jim. Thank you very much.
No problem. Great being here, my friend.
That is Jim Powers. You can see him here on Fox 2, on the Fox 2 Prep Zone. And our thanks to you for joining us on the 101 on Sports. Thanks to Jamie Rivers and Jim Powers. And we will see you next week on the 101 on Sports here on Fox 2.